We go. Hey, everybody, it's me, Andrew, and it's you, Alan Parsons. How are you, Alan?
Hey, doing great. Thank
Thank,
you.
thank you very
Nice
much
to
for
be here.
joining me. This is very exciting. I've been looking forward to this one for quite a while, I have to say. So I
Oh,
want to give a quick shout out to PJ Olson who got us in touch.
indeed. Hi, Peach, if you're watching.
So a
And
very
thank
fine man. I actually worked on his very first record with Carmen Rizzo way back in the day.
Oh, really? Yeah,
Yeah,
that must have been a while ago. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well,
He's now based in Nashville, in a brand new Airstream truck, which he's building a studio in, and then he's
because
gonna
because like
go on
you, he
tour.
he has to build studios.
Yeah, I think he does.
Excellent. Well, speaking of a long time ago, I'd like to go all the way back to the beginning, if I may. Um, Whoa, sorry about that. Let me go on Do Not Disturb because it's very unprofessional to do that. So I'd like to go in the Wayback Machine. It's been somewhat documented about your move once you got to the EMI tape library job, but I want to start off with because you've alluded to the fact that you played a bunch of instruments as a kid, right? Guitar, piano, flute. Your dad actually invented the Parsons code of melodic contour, which is this amazing notation system for just does the melody. It's almost like one bit A to D in a way. It's a really funny thing. But so there is obviously quite a bit of music in your house, right?
Yeah, I mean, my dad's system was the ultimate in simplicity. It identified tunes by whether the second note was the same as the first note, or higher or lower, and then the next note again, whether it's the same, higher or lower, so it was D for down, U for up, and R for repeat. I think that's what it was.
And
So
was
you,
it was it meant to actually help you learn the melody, or is it to help classify melodies?
It was the main purpose was if you had a tune going around in your head and you didn't know what it was, you would just go write it down, and then you could look it up alphabetically in the book. Of course, if he were alive today, it would have been applied to digital media and probably still would have been quite valuable. Although I'm so impressed that Soundhound can identify a tune by
Yeah,
you whistling it or humming it.
yeah,
It's
and in
extraordinary.
seconds, it's
Yeah.
insane. But I suppose, in a way, I mean, it's actually a really useful tool for something like plagiarism and things like that. Because if the contour is the same, that's a really good place to start.
Yes, my dad did discover that there were favorite patterns of down, up, down, repeat. Some got used much more than others, and that's perhaps an indication of how easy it might be to plagiarize something.
Right, right. And so, was there quite a bit of music going on in your house growing up?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I discovered pop music probably at 11, but my dad always had classical music going in the house, and of course he would play the flute, he'd play the piano, um, and we would play duets, sitting side by side at the piano. That was
Right.
fun. And my mother too. Although my parents split up when I was 9 years old, but my mother was also a musician. She played the Celtic harp and sang traditional Scottish folk songs.
Wow.
So that
And
was
did
definitely a musical upbringing.
and did you do the typical teenager get an electric thing and start playing in bands, or not really?
Um, I I started a band at school. Yes, I bought a guitar at a junk shop, which was £5, and thankfully it wasn't a piece of crap. It was a fairly reasonable guitar with a fairly reasonable action, and that's what started it. Then after about 6 months of doing nothing else but playing my guitar, I started a band at school at the age of about probably 14.
Right. And were you writing at all, or was this all just covers at this point?
All covers at this point.
Yeah.
I hadn't really thought about writing yet, and in fact, nobody did. Nobody,
Yeah.
nobody until the Beatles came along, had really thought about. Oh wow, we can actually write our own songs and play them in this band. Yes, we did covers of Chuck Berry and Peter and Gordon, who were actually at the same school as I was.
Right.
So we did covers of them, and the Shadows, instrumentals. The Shadows were, or still are, best known as Cliff Richard's backing band.
Yeah.
Cliff was a huge star in the UK compared with America.
Oh yeah, yeah, gigantic. It's about as popular as you could get. I mean, the fact that he's the butt of the joke at the end of The Young Ones is, that's testament to it. So did you want to pursue a career as a musician, or you just love playing and it was just something that people did?
I don't think I had any aspirations towards being a professional musician. But upon leaving school, I felt that being a recording engineer was actually out of reach. That's something I could never do.
Oh, really? So, but you were aware of that as a thing coming out of school?
Yeah, I mean, I was curious about how records were made, and I remember being horrified when I saw a film of I think it was The Shadows, and I just felt that an electric guitar should be plugged in, not played through an amp and then put a mic on it. I thought that was really a really strange way of doing things. But of course, we all know better now. We're even reamping now. So
yeah, well, unless it's Revolution, then you plug it straight in, right? So. Wow. Okay, so you knew that making records was a thing, but just it didn't seem like something you were going to do.
I think I knew I wanted to be in entertainment somewhere. I'd also considered the idea of being a cameraman,
right?
A TV camera, or working in radio, or background in TV somewhere. It was really only through a sort of chance thought that came into my head when I was working at this West London department of EMI that was directly connected to Abbey Road. I actually said to myself, maybe, just maybe, if I apply for a job there, they might give me one, because I had a little bit of experience with tape machines, and that was the department that was making reel-to-reel copies of EMI's products at the time.
Right. And
pre-cassettes.
And did that job you just got a job? Oh, I think we've lost him. If it's like every other person's internet, he'll be back in a second. Or maybe not. I don't really have much to show you because I've been cleaning up my studio. I've got a screwdriver here, though, which is Phillips. It's a pretty good one. But that's not what you're here to see. So hopefully Alan will be back with us in a moment. This is where I realize that I haven't actually updated the graphics on the We'll Be Right Back screen, which is why I have to talk to you now. So, well, I'm in the midst of setting up my room for Atmos, which is why I cleaned up. So that's all very exciting. I've got a gigantic pile of speakers staring at me at the moment. And then as we progress over the next month or so, hopefully speakers will start appearing behind me and above me. So that's a very exciting thing. But not as exciting as talking to Alan Parsons. So hopefully he will be right back.
Would you like me to do my joke?
I would like you to do your joke. Mark has a joke. Come on in, Mark.
Actually, I don't have to because Alan's back.
Ah, fantastic. You can save it then.
I'll save it for later.
All right.
Get we did get disconnected. I don't know who. I don't know which end that happened, but you just suddenly froze.
Yeah, as did you. So, yeah, I don't know. I was just asking, the job at EMI Tape Records, was that just, you got that just because you needed a job, or was that sort of thinking, well, this is something to do with music and...
Interestingly, the very first job I had with EMI was in a research lab for television camera tubes.
Wow.
And it was an apprenticeship scheme, and I just thought that was a good idea. I'd left school early. I'd left school at 16 without doing the exams that you normally do in high school at 18, which are called A levels. I only went to the O level and so yes, I was a bit of a high school dropout, to be honest. So I just went. I thought EMI sounded like a good company to be with, and it was just a series of good decisions and being in the right place at the right time.
Right. And so then it was just a lateral move over to the tape copying job, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And I think the clincher was hearing Sergeant Pepper for the first time, and that's pretty much when I resolved to become a recording engineer, I think.
And did you get to hear the records while you're copying them? Because it was high-speed copies while you're actually doing the product, right?
Right. It was four times normal speed. No, you didn't. You didn't listen while the copies were actually made. But what I was doing was making copies of the master tape at the right speed, which was actually, I think it was 7.5 was the master tape speed, running at 30 IPS, and then the slaves, the recording machines, were running at 15 and recording at 3 3/4
right
IPS. So not an ideal situation, and a 7.5 IPS source was not really the greatest, but the process demanded it. And the tape machines, of course, had to have an extremely high-end frequency response to deal with 40K.
Right. Wow. Yeah, it wasn't a very long-lived format either, was it? I mean...
No, when cassettes came along, they pretty much went out of the window.
Yeah.
They sounded great. I mean, these tapes really were really good sounding, but they were mono, and they were, you had to turn them over halfway, and
right,
a bit of a slog.
Right, but still better than 8 tracks. So, okay, so you hear Sgt. Pepper's, you think, I think now I am gonna go try and make some records. So you got in touch with the studio, asked for a gig, and shockingly, almost immediately, there was an opening, right?
The first thing that happened was the interview, and I did reasonably well at the interview, I think. And yes, a week after that, I got a letter saying apply for a transfer, which is what it was. It was I went to the personnel department and said, please transfer my account to Abbey Road, and that's what. I started with a stint in the tape library, which was actually very valuable. That was about 3 or 4 weeks, and then they fired 2 guys. So the the manager may have known that he was going to fire them when I was taken on, but I think I was for a moment I was a little bit unpopular because the 2 guys that got fired were highly thought of.
Right. And so you got to skip a little bit of the usual hierarchy then, right? Did you go through mastering and all the rest of it, or did you kind of go straight into the control rooms then?
I didn't go through mastering. Mastering was normally the step between being a second engineer and being a balance engineer.
Oh, right. Okay.
But I did, a few weeks literally just being a fly on the wall, watching sessions take place, and probably after only about a month, I was actually pushing buttons on a tape machine, loading up tapes and so on.
Right. That's great. It's such an amazing group of people who were there at the same time. And obviously there were some people who got fired as well. So it's not like it's, a magic unicorn place, but it is. And there were a few studios like that, Media Sound in New York, who had the incredible roster. But I mean, the group of people you were there with was kind of insane. And even with the people, I mean, John Leckie started a little bit after you, right? But he had that same sort of thing where he came in and then was almost immediately put into the rooms and then had very quick success. And obviously, you're learning under Jeff Emmerich and Ken Scott and Norman. It's just an insane group of people.
Right. Yes. And it was, of course, not really something I recognized at the time. I mean, I knew that I was working with very talented engineers, but I didn't realize how much would rub off on me from these guys. It was, I mean, there were other engineers at Abbey Road, perhaps slightly less well known. Peter Bowen was one, and Peter Vince, another who I admired enormously. Peter Vince in particular, he just never got a bad sound. It was extraordinary.
And did they all have similar styles because of the sort of prescribed way microphones were going to be used and things? And obviously that was starting to get bent around that time, but were they all very, very different in terms of how much they would experiment, or was there kind of an Abbey Road thing at that time?
There really wasn't. I think engineers had their own sound. All those guys had a sound. You could play one of their tapes and say, oh, Peter Bowen did that, or Jeff Emmerich did that.
Right.
It was. I mean, I know it's sort of legendary how Abbey Road had certain directives about not using ribbon mics on kick drum and stuff like that, but it really was the individual engineer's style that came through.
Right. And because by the time you got there, you could actually move a microphone if you wanted to, right? I mean, it wasn't as hardcore as it was much earlier on.
No, yeah. I mean, that's a bit of an old wives' tale that we were all wearing white coats and stuff. We weren't. The only directive was that we had to wear a tie, at least for the first year that I was there. But the white coat brigade were the technical engineers, the guys that would put the mics out, yes, but the second engineers were getting more into putting out mics,
right,
putting them away at the end of the session as well.
Actually, one of the questions I wanted to ask about this era, because it's come up a lot talking to people who are working in New York at around this time or a little later, the idea of a lockout absolutely did not exist. It was all short sessions, and then some of the studios went to daytime and nighttime sessions, but it was always at least 2 sessions you're tearing down. At any of the time, I mean, and we'll certainly get into this in a bit, talking about Dark Side of the Moon, but was there ever a time where a band could lock out a studio there and really just stay set up? Because you see all the footage of Dark Side of the Moon and everything's set up, but there's a guitar overdub going on, and it seems like a lot to do if you have to keep tearing it down and setting it back up.
Yeah, I mean, I think by the time the early 70s, which is the Dark Side period, by the time that had come along, the concept of lockdown had pretty much come into effect. But we always, in the early years, we used to joke that the echo switches itself off, the echo chamber switches itself off at midnight, so we can't go beyond midnight. So, but
if only.
That was. I actually did quite in the probably about 1970. I did quite a bit of 12 midnight to 6 a.m. sessions.
Right.
Notably with a band called the Aerovons out of St. Louis, American wannabe Beatles band.
Right. Well, they were in the right place. So, speaking of the Beatles, let's speak of the Beatles here. So, were the first Beatles sessions you worked on the Let It Be sessions at Apple, or did you work with them at Abbey Road first?
No, the first sessions were at Apple.
And you were sent as a Abbey Road sort of representative, or how did that come about?
No, they needed a tape op. They just didn't have any staff
Right.
at their new studio, and Abbey Road's mobile unit was taken on to take some consoles down there to install in place of Magic Alex's console,
Right.
which simply did not work. So I was there to help a bit with that installation, and then soon after that to be their tape op for the ensuing few days, including the rooftop. Thankfully, I was not down in the basement doing tape for the rooftop session. I was actually up on the roof, watching it happen, praying that no mics broke down, because
Right.
that's why I was up. But I was in the right place, definitely, to be on the
Yeah.
roof.
I mean, because I think I've seen a picture of you. You're right behind one of the cameramen, right?
Yes, crazy decision on my part to place myself there, because I'm not in one single foot of the movie. At least not yet. Peter Jackson, I met a few months ago, and he swears that I will be in his movie. So
All right.
I'm looking forward to seeing that.
And how was it working with Glyn Johns on that? Because I imagine, I mean, it was a lot going on. It was a busy time, but how was that, and how did he compare to the engineers you were used to working with?
I liked him very much. He, despite it being the Beatles, he was still very helpful and educational. He would say, "Why do you think I'm doing this?" Pointing a mic away from a guitar amp, and very very educational and kind and fun to work with. And I knew his reputation, and I knew what he was being paid. And that was what staggered me. He was getting £5 an hour allegedly, and that was so much money.
That's a guitar every hour.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and he was one of the first engineers to move between studios and be available elsewhere.
He was the concept of a freelance engineer just hadn't really clicked until that point.
Yeah.
And Abbey Road would have a problem if an outside engineer came in. It was almost like a trade union. There would always have to be an Abbey Road engineer on the session, as well as any independent engineer.
Right.
I mean, ironically, Jeff Emerick came in as a freelance engineer after he'd left Abbey Road, and he was not allowed to be on the console. And I would be his engineer. It's crazy. Limit the voice a bit more. Turn the top on the snare drum a bit. He should have been doing it. It shouldn't have been.
I suppose it's quite an education, though, to have to engineer through his ears. That's got to have been interesting.
It was very interesting. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so back to Abbey Road, the studio, to work on Abbey Road, the album.
Right.
So
that was a much lengthier and more rewarding experience overall in terms of what I learned from it. It was back to precision recording again, whereas Let It Be had been very kind of sloppy. Just playing the songs live, and then Phil Spector, did his stuff on it. But it was back to precision recording, and their first real encounter with 8-track on a precision recording.
So, sorry, just to go back to the Let It Be. I mean, I should know this because everybody should know everything about every Beatles album, but I forget things. So, on those basic tracking sessions, Phil was not involved at all at that point, right? The record was brought to him after. So, this is just Glyn and the band self-producing at that point, right?
And George Martin was there.
Oh, so he was actually physically there for all those sessions as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, he may have stepped out occasionally to do a quick sort of black session or something, but
Yeah.
my memory is that he was there most of the time. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Again, things I'm supposed to know, but
No. Far from.
All right. So we get to 1970, and you are assisting Peter Brown on Adam Hart Mother, right?
Bound, yes.
Brown. Sorry, typo.
Oh, okay.
This is probably autocorrect on my notes. So,
Just and there was another major typo on the credits for Dark Side. It was the engineer, the second engineer was listed as Peter Jones, but his name was Peter James, which eventually got corrected. But took some time.
there were enough pressings of that so they could correct the artwork. But so Peter was actually double booked as that was finishing up, right? And did you end up mixing the whole record?
I did, yep.
Right.
And I'd done all the sessions as second engineer, so I knew what was what and what was on what track, and So I mean, but they were taking a risk, I suppose. I was green. I was new to the art of being a full-blown engineer, but they had good ears. They knew what they wanted, and it came out well.
And was Norman Smith? He's listed as an executive producer, but was he hands-on production on that record? Or
absolutely not.
No. The band is just self-produced.
Not seen once. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's just an EMI. Like he's been assigned. That's his thing. Now, that's the first time you'd worked with Pink Floyd, right? You didn't work on any of the earlier records. What I'm curious about is that's obviously the first record without Sid, and I'm wondering if they just hit the ground running with that, or whether there seemed to be a bit of trying to find their feet, because it's a pretty different band.
I did do a couple of sessions as second engineer on Amagama. But literally only just a couple of sessions. Whereas Atom Heart Mother, I did every session, and then, as you pointed out, I got the mixing job because Peter Bound was double booked. Sorry, I've lost.
No, I was just wondering if you sort of witnessed any of the transition to the post Sid Barrett, because obviously a lot of the lyrics are actually left over from things that Sid had written with the band for that record. And Dark Side of the Moon is the first one that he didn't really write any lyrics at all, but it's still got to be a gigantic change for them. I'm just wondering if you really saw any of that.
Really, my only experience with the Floyd was in the post Sid period, but I did do some sessions with Sid as well.
Right?
Did you know that? David and Rick, David Gilmour and Richard Wright, produced an album called The Madcap Laughs with Sid. I mean, totally chaotic. I mean, it was chaos, those sessions. It really was. And just trying to get Sid to apply himself to making a record. It was very tough.
Well, John Leckie's only story of working with Sid is that he was supposed to work with Sid and Sid never showed up, and that was that. So,
well, that was another problem, getting him to show up.
Right. And so, also right around this time, coming up in 1971, and I'm going sort of by release date because it's the easiest way for me to find things. So first of all, a record I'd love to talk about a little bit is Roy Harper's Stormcock, because I think it's a fantastic record. Pete Jenner producing. I think Phil McDonald was the main engineer for most of that record. Do I have that right?
You could be right. I thought it might have been me, but if it's not me.
Oh no, I don't. I don't know. I'm just. It's very hard to figure out, because the internet is the internet, and then printing say stuff. So, but I'd love to.
So Phil is credited on Stormcock, is he? As engineer?
Yeah. You and Phil are credited as engineers, and then John Leckie and one other person are credited as help, which John says was the extra hands during the mix, kind of thing. Right. But I mean, I would love to hear a little bit about how. I hate getting into recording techniques like this. I love to stay big picture, but the acoustic guitar sounds on that record are kind of astounding. There's some of the most aggressive aggressive guitar sounds I've ever heard. And a lot of it obviously is his performance, but that had to have been a slightly different approach to recording acoustic guitar, knowing that was going to drive the record, but have to support orchestras and brass and all sorts of other stuff too. So anything you want to say about that record, I would love to hear.
I have absolutely no idea why the acoustic guitars sounded particularly good. I mean, maybe they were wonderful guitars. Maybe I've always used the same microphone on acoustic guitars. That's a KM84. Little bit of top end added, a little bit of bass roll off, and that's how I've always recorded acoustic.
Right.
Were they double tracked quite a bit?
His playing is so tight, it's hard to say, but I believe probably 3/4 of the record is double tracked, and then there's some of it that's just got more of a stereo sound, but I'm pretty sure is a single performance. It's hard to say though.
Mm-hmm. One technique which I don't think I'd started using at that time was whenever I double tracked something, I would change the tape speed slightly.
Right.
Just so you get a chorusing effect. Much more difficult to do in the digital age, I have to say.
I've talked about this with a bunch of different people, and to me, it is the one thing I miss hugely from working on tape. It's the only thing I miss from working on tape, is that VSO is a huge part of every session.
You should buy yourself a Big Ben. That does the job.
Right.
Did you know?
How far can you go with that?
Oh, not very much. I mean, but the way I used it, it was just a matter of a few cents. It was not even
right.
It was not even a quarter tone or a half tone.
Right.
But yes, I've made full use of my Big Ben in my studio to replace VSO.
Right. Excellent. And then another record that same year is Paul McCartney and Wings, Wildlife, which again, you got to do a mix of one song on that, right?
It was because I had been asked to do some rough mixes, just to run off some rough mixes of the state of the album so far. And one of the songs, it's called "I Am Your Singer," they heard the mix and said, "That's fine, Alan. we'll go with that." So that was I was hugely chuffed by that. That was the first major artist that I had a mix accepted for, pretty much.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, the Adam Hart Mother, while once people go looking back on the career, sort of take all Pink Floyd records almost as like the band was big from the start, but it's not really the case, right? I mean, they did okay, but it was not. Yeah, the Paul McCartney and Wings thing that's huge. That
did predate.
Did it?
Adam Hart.
Oh, right. It could be. Yeah,
look. You've got a date sheet in front of you.
Well, but again, these dates are from the internet, and the internet is wrong a lot. And it's also based on release dates.
I was very definitely a second engineer at the time of both, actually.
Right.
So they could have been the same year.
Right.
But I like to think that the McCartney, Wings Wildlife predates the Adam Hart Mother album by a month or two, certainly.
All right. Well, let's say it does, because why not?
Somebody out there is looking that up right now and is going to
They are, but the
phone
problem
it.
is they're using the internet to look it up. So they're going to, they'll just find all the same misinformation I've got. Now, another band you were working with quite a bit, which I wanted to talk about, was the Hollies.
Yes, the Hollies. I started working with them literally the day after Graham Nash left,
Wow.
and was replaced by Terry Sylvester. Wonderful, wonderful bunch of guys to work with. They were always considerate to the engineers. Always arrived on time. Always left on time. Always got the job done. And their producer had their respect, and vice versa. Ron Richards. And Ron had an incredible knack of finding a hit song, or knowing a hit song when he heard it. And that was never more the case than when they brought in a demo of "He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother."
Yeah.
And Ron said, "This is such a colossal hit. We must record this song." And so he called up his chum Reggie Dwight, who played piano on that song.
Right.
Not a lot of people know that, although I've told it on countless occasions in interviews. But people are still slightly surprised that Elton John played with the Hollies. But there we go.
Well, why not? Why not? I mean, if you're going to have to get someone in who can just do stuff on the fly, he'd be first choice, wouldn't he? I mean, especially for a song like that. That's
Indeed,
great.
Indeed.
And
yeah, he did a lovely job.
And so many great songs from that band too. And you've spoken about Ron Richards, and did he become a little bit of a mentor in terms of your looking at the way he was choosing songs and things like that? Or
he was definitely not into engineering in any sense. He would never make any comments on sound, only on performance, which is it's a style of production that I could identify with for certain people, and there were other producers who definitely did take an interest in how the soundscape was coming along during a recording. But Ron Richards was definitely a song man and a song and performance guy.
Right.
Not really interested in production as it were.
Right. And I mean, I'd imagine the Hollies could arrange themselves no problem with the level of musicianship in that band too. So.
Yep, indeed. But Ron felt the need for He Ain't Heavy to have orchestration, which I think was Chris Gunning that did the orchestration on that. And likewise on The Air That I Breathe, he wanted that to be orchestrated too.
Right.
That was the first. The Air That I Breathe was my first single top 10 success. So,
right.
That was a good one for me.
It's huge. It's such a beautiful song too. Just yeah.
It is a great song.
Yeah, you'd imagine Ron got very happy when he heard that.
Again, we heard is it Don Everly or Phil Everly that wrote it? I always get those two mixed up. But yeah, we heard his version of it, and off they went, and they recorded it. It was done they always got a song a day done, start to finish.
And these are like what 6-hour sessions or?
It was 2:30 to 5:30, 1.5 hour break, 7 till 10.
Right.
And, the hour and a half in between was normally spent around the pub.
Right. Well, and by pub, do you mean the canteen in the studio, or actually going out to the pub?
No. We would go out.
Right.
They favoured alcoholic beverages during the break.
Right.
Which were not available at the Abbey Road canteen at that time, at least.
Well, they've loosened up quite a bit.
Yeah, yes, they did.
All right, so the Hollies sort of recur a few times, but I think 72 was Romany. I think that was the first album you worked with them on. Anyway, just trying to stay slightly chronological.
Wasn't Hollies sing Dylan? I thought that might be the first one.
Could have been, again, this is the...
Chronology is not my strong subject.
Yeah, it's absolutely fine. So, but 1973, in terms of release date, there's quite a bit of music, and there's some I definitely want to talk about. First of all, there's Band on the Run. So that big. Can start there if you'd like.
I didn't do a single thing on Band on the Run.
On a single thing, except you've got a credit on it, according to the internet. So let's skip over that and get to Red Rose Speedway then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Red Rose Speedway, yes. I did a fair amount of work on that. And it was fun, you know. It was good to do, and it was my first real experience engineering for a Beatle, you know. So it was a big feather in my cap.
And I also, looking at the discographies of the artists you're working with, you realize the work rate is so high. I mean, every major artist is putting out at least one record a year still. And I mean, obviously the Beatles were putting out records like crazy, but this continued on. But there are two other records you worked on, or maybe you didn't, we'll find out. But according to the internet, you did, who are more artists who didn't really break out outside of the UK, but were pretty important here. Roy Wood and Wizzard.
Right.
And I'd love to hear a little bit about both of them, if you don't mind.
Well, Roy Wood was actually a founder member of the original Electric Light Orchestra, but he parted company with them, leaving Jeff Lynne and Bevan to do. And he was also in a band called The Move, who had a lot of success in the UK. But I got assigned to do an album with Roy, which was a fantastic experience. He's incredibly talented guy, and he would make strange requests like, "Can you make my vocal distort?" And you know, that's the one thing an engineer does not want to hear. You know, make my voice distorted. But it was really fun to do, and he really taught me the vari-speed trick, the
right,
you know, the chorusing using VSO. He did it on all kinds of instruments on that album. And then Wizzard was a spin-off thing which they had a hit with. It was a song called Ballpark Incident, and it did well. I remember they had two drummers that played the same part, so literally like having double track drums. But yeah, they were. I think their success was short-lived. Oh, they did a Christmas song, which I wasn't involved with, which continues to this day to be very popular.
Right. I mean, I'm out in the Midlands now, and of course that's their stomping ground. So there's still, you know, lots of people around talking about Roy and about Wizzard and all that.
Oh, you're around Birmingham somewhere, are you?
Yeah, just south. I'm closer to Worcester. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah. But I've had the pleasure of a drink with Bevan.
Roy was a definite Brummie.
Yes.
No question.
Yeah, big part of the scene out here. So.
No, he was hugely influential, and I still have enormous respect for Roy as a musician and producer. He had an incredible vision in his head ahead of time for every song that he recorded.
Right. So finished product in his head, and it just had to get out.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay, look, this brings us to a rather large subject called Dark Side of the Moon, which we have to spend some time discussing. There's obviously been tons and tons of...
All right. Did I make it clear? No Pink Floyd questions?
Oh, right. Sorry. No, we hadn't said that. All right. Well, thanks for coming, Mr. Parsons. No, not at all. I don't want to rehash everything because obviously there's a great classic albums of it. There's lots and lots of footage of you talking about it. But one thing I wanted to ask before we even get to Dark Side is, so you worked on Atom Heart Mother all the way through, including the mixing, then was Metal not made at Abbey Road? And that's because you missed that one, and Obscured by Clouds, which is, you know, the soundtrack album, which I think was an aberration in a lot of ways. But Metal was much more of a straight ahead Pink Floyd record.
Yeah, it was just Atom Heart Mother and Dark Side that I was involved with.
But didn't you do some live sound for them preceding the sessions for Dark Side?
They were pretty much concurrent. I was out doing the live show with them during the making of the album.
Oh, right. Okay.
And after.
Because I know a big part of them getting ready to make the record was playing everything live, like sort of the reverse of what any band would do now. You know, you don't ever play your songs before they're released, but they were really trying out the record. And I know there are famously some things that were completely different, but generally the shape of that album was
the title is one thing that changed. It was called Eclipse when they were
right
when they were playing it live during the recording period, and Dark Side of the Moon came later.
And so was it scheduled so that they could be playing live during the recording process, or it's just the way it worked out? I mean, how much of a plan was that to continue to play live while going through the recording?
Oh, I think they just like to keep their date sheet fairly busy.
Right.
So we would go out on the road for 3 or 4 weeks, and then back in the studio for 3 or 4 weeks. It's fairly intensive schedule, as I remember.
Right. And so you were never not working with them through that period, basically.
Not much else going on. No, you're right.
Yeah. Now, I've heard you say in a few interviews that you made sure that you were the engineer on all those sessions. But I know from some of the other interviews that it was hard to have control over that. And some studios would purposefully swap out the engineers on long-running projects. So was it difficult to make sure that you were the engineer, or was it just a matter of saying, they want me to do this record, I want to do the record, we're doing it?
I think I went to the bookings lady, Vera Samuel, and said, please try and make sure that I do all these sessions, and don't book me on anything else unless, I mean, I think there was one situation where I had to work early next morning and then come in, you know, do a 10 to 1 in the morning and then start with Floyd at 2 in the afternoon. I think that happened a couple of times, but other than that, it was pretty easy to be the only engineer. I just didn't want to share credit with anybody else.
Right. And I've seen that you spent a lot of time getting the drum sound at the very beginning of the project. And then that drum sound, even though you were switching studios and you're going out on the road and coming back and the same kit was being used, was the sound. So can you just tell me, because I mean, you would never spend more than, half an hour getting a drum sound normally, because you've got to get in there and record because the session's going to be over. So what was the process, and what was it you were actually looking for that was different from the kind of drum sound you would normally get?
Well, it wasn't what I was looking for. I think it was what Nick was looking for, and it was fairly frustrating in the first few sessions, or perhaps only the first couple of sessions, where he did not feel that the drum sound was what he wanted. But somehow I managed to find the right combination of what I thought was right and what he thought was right, and then he completely let go. He just assumed that I would apply the same principles to all the songs, other than the ones that he'd been a little bit difficult over, and he just let it go. Just let me record the drums, and he never made any further comment.
Right.
After that.
And so to your ears, what was the crux of what it was he was trying to get out of it? Do you know even? Or you just got there and then that was that?
To be honest, I don't think it actually changed that much. I think it was pretty close to what we ended up with. He was either just testing me, just to see if I could do anything radical that would make an enormous difference to what his drums sounded like. But he had a good kit. He had good drums, good toms, good snare drum. It didn't take a lot of hard work to just to get that onto tape.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic drum sound, but it isn't that out of the ordinary. It's just a really, really good drum sound. But I mean, I've had times with artists where you start recording and they're unhappy with the sound of their instrument, and by coming in and listening and talking about what they want you to change, they actually go out and sort of adjust what they're doing. And by doing very little, they end up in a place. So I wonder if he was changing his playing as much as whatever small tweaks you're making.
I think he's one of the lighter touched drummers out there. He didn't ever really whack them. And that might be part of the sound. Just his gentle touch on the drums.
Right. Well, you certainly get tone that way. So, I mean, there's so many great things about the record, but they're all documented. The thing that the rototoms were just left behind in the studio and then become this iconic part of one of the songs on the record and so that. So we don't have to go over that too much. But one of the things I wanted
what's interesting was that there were more rototom notes than there were rototoms. So we had to retune them for each chord change.
And so did you record all of chord one out, back in for chord one, so get all the chord ones, or did you record in a progression so that you knew the part was going to work?
A combination of both, as I remember.
Right.
But once we discovered we had to do all this retuning, we said, well, why don't we do all the B minors and then all the C's and whatever the notes were. But it was fairly painstaking and a fairly stressful punch in, punch out process.
Right.
Because no undo button.
No, and I'm assuming you're recording them rather ambiently as well. Right.
I'm not sure about that.
Maybe not.
I think we've been reasonably close up, and the ambience is coming from an EMT plate, which is pretty much the only reverb used on the whole album.
Right. And so, what do you remember? Because obviously that's a very happy accident, but it's an accident because you didn't even know there were going to be rototoms. So what was originally going on there? Do you remember?
I don't. It would have been pretty dull without the rototoms, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, because I was trying to imagine it with like normal drum fills, and that wouldn't really necessarily. I mean, you could do it on the toms, but it wouldn't have been that.
For some reason, every version that I can think of, both every live version of it that I can remember, had rototoms on it.
Right. It's a really funny thing with that album because I think it's so well known by the people who've heard it, which is pretty much almost everyone on the planet, that even when you see footage of like Gilmour out in the studio working out parts, he's just doing a take and then go back and do another take, and everything he's playing just sounds totally wrong until he plays the thing that's on the record. Even though it's all great, but it all feels.
Let me turn off this ringing phone.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second.
Absolutely.
I'll call you right back.
I can show you my screwdriver again. I also have a dusting Swiffer, which is kind of good. So here, I'll dust off the camera for you. Okay.
Sorry, Andrew. I'll be right back.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I'm just going to have a sip of my coffee. And from my Oh, my video's reversed. But anyway, I think these are available. It's a nice mug, actually. I'm not doing it to promote the show. I'm doing it because I actually really like this mug. This is my everyday mug now.
Hi there.
Hey.
Sorry.
No worries. No worries at all. So, look, I got two more things about Dark Side of the Moon, then we can move on, if that's all right. But they're both slightly, I mean, I don't think it's going to be touchy, but one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit was Chris Thomas, if that's all right, coming in on that record. Because I know, like, there's bonus footage, and I went back and watched it yesterday just to make sure I had this right in my own head. In the bonus interview footage on the Classic Albums series, they've very purposefully cut between you two, you talking about the not really wanting to compress too much and wanting to make sure everything stayed really open, and him talking about, yeah, and I just wanted to say, hey, can we try a compressor on that guitar? And like, so obviously a different sort of approach, but it's, I don't know if that's just in the editing of it, or was it actually a very different approach to how you thought you were going to end up with that record going?
I mean, if you get the multi-tracks out, which I have had the opportunity to do a couple of times since the recording, it's really all there on the multi-tracks. I mean, it was just a case of balance, really,
Right.
on the mix. So I mean, I think most of what you hear is there. I mean, of course, there's no reverb on anything, and there's delays missing, but the raw product is pretty much there.
Yeah.
I think on the 16 track. It was 16 track, remember, not 24.
Right.
The philosophy that I had was that I would prefer not to compress the drums, and so I created two groups, a compressed group and a non-compressed group, and I think that's pretty much what we ended up for most of the album. I think there was one tune, but I can't remember which one it was, that did have slightly compressed drums on it as well.
Right.
But Chris was brought in to be the fresh ears, and so I was the engineer, not the producer. So I did what he asked, and between us we got it sounding really good.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's phenomenal, obviously, and it seemed as though from all the interviews I've seen that it was really that Roger and David were never going to agree unless they had someone sort of just come in and present them with something. And then they could almost not wash their hands of it, because they're obviously still very involved in it. But, I mean, I think there was one, I think it was Roger who was talking about how a couple of the songs were nothing like what he thought they were going to be. But in a way that was actually more liberating, because he could just say, oh, yep, that works. I'm feeling what I'm supposed to feel without having to figure it out. So, yeah. I
mean, they were, I think, almost without exception, they were all present for all the mixes. Not only just because they took a genuine interest in the mix, but they were extra hands to push things up and down, to change EQ, to add echo, whatever.
Right.
At a particular moment, because once again, we're pre-automation those days. Pre-digital, anything, no digital delays, all delays done with tape.
And I'd imagine there are a few songs where you're sharing tracks pretty regularly with 16 track.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So a lot to do.
We actually ended up second generation 16 track. I think in most cases the bass and drums were combined to a pair of tracks.
Right.
Bass and drums together. So. And then, of course, little effects and little pieces of dialogue would have to be slotted in a gap where there was a track available.
Right.
And obviously, not obviously, but often needing to be panned or treated differently to the other material on that same track.
Right. Well, okay,
I remember we did do some mixing in sections. It was too much of an effort to get the entire song done in one pass. So we would do it up to a certain point, and stop, and then mark all the faders, and then move on to the next section and so on. That's a technique I did later in later years with Ambrosia in particular.
Right. When you're doing that, I'm just curious, would you always sort of mix in sequence, or were there times when you would mix choruses and then mix verses because of something that had to be so radically different?
Oh no, it would be in sequence.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, so it's just up to a point, reset, carry on.
Right.
Right.
Well, not so much reset as make sure you don't move anything going into the next session that would make it jump from the previous section.
Right. Right. And would you test edit immediately, or just you knew what you were doing at that point?
I don't think there was any need for test edits.
Yeah.
If it didn't work, we would just do it again.
Right.
as I remember, it was fine. Yeah.
All right. Well, one other thing about that record, because it's one of the best-selling records of all time. It has set records for being on the charts, for having more conspiracy theories about like Wizard of Oz and stuff like that about it. But that particular year, a certain Mr. Stephen Wonder won a Grammy over Dark Side of the Moon. Is there anything you would like to say to Mr. Wonder about that? Or just to the general public?
Well, you'd think I would want to say "damn you," but Stevie Wonder is a great artist, and it was just bad luck, and perhaps not enough exposure of Pink Floyd at the time to get the votes. But of course, I was disappointed. Yes.
Yeah.
Very disappointed. But, and especially as it has become such a sort of phenomenon for a sort of reference phenomenon for engineers and producers and musicians alike.
Yeah.
Which, of course, I'm delighted about. I mean, nothing makes me feel better than knowing that's the case.
It's yeah. I mean, I don't even need to say anything about it because everybody knows everything about it. But it just broke so many rules, having a single in 7, and like just so many things about it that are non-traditional. But it had a almost traditional label push behind it too, right? I mean, it was very much everybody behind that record helping it to be, and obviously once it gets out there, then it's all up to the record itself. But it really got an amazing release considering.
Yes, I think the late Bhaskar Menon, he just died very recently, who was the head of Capitol Records at the time. I think he's given a lot of credit for the promotional activities that happened and how it rose up the charts. It also helped that they were on the road touring in states while the record was climbing the charts.
Right.
I think that was a big help.
Right. Well, phenomenal.
But, yeah, I mean, it was a phenomenon in every way.
Yeah.
In fact, here's a band that really had very limited success, and then suddenly it's become the album everybody's talking about. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could. It's talked about probably as an individual album as much as any Beatles record ever has been. Because with Beatles, it's the body of work, it's the phenomenon, it's the fact that they started so many things. But Dark Side of the Moon is it. Yeah. Anyway, the Pantheon. It is the Mount Rushmore of records. So thank you for that. By the way, it just absolutely amazing. So okay. So the following year, you still are doing tons of stuff. One of the things is you worked on both Pilot and Cockney Rebel that came out the following year. Was one of those your first actual production credit? It seemed to be, from what I could find.
No,
Or
no.
no?
I'd done a couple of sort of self-driven productions before that,
Right.
self-financed, self-driven. Um, but Pilot were the first band to be handed to me on a plate by the offices at Manchester Square, the EMI head office. Um, they just came to me and said, we've got a band that we think you'd like to work with. They have a talented engineer in the group. Billy Lyle was an engineer who'd done all their previous demos up until the time that I became involved. And I jumped at the chance. I thought the songs were great, and one song in particular, which we did not have the success that I'd hoped we would have, but their second song, January, did go to number one, and that was my first number one.
Right.
And my second number one, I'm pleased to say, was another of my productions, Steve Harley and Cockney Rebel, and they were consecutive number ones. So that was a great feeling of achievement on my part.
Right. And then
that.
Magic was gigantic from Pilot
Magic
as well,
did
right?
Magic did very well in America. I think it was top 5 in America.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's being used as we speak for a commercial for a prescription drug, I think. Ozempic, I think it's called Ozempic.
I hope it's something to do with erectile dysfunction, because, I don't really want the word magic with my medicine unless it's that. Like, that's okay. So you also, you made a record with, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to look up to see if it was this drug called Ozempic.
Yeah, because we'll advertise the hell out of it right here.
Yes, it's Ozempic, but what does the drug do?
Well, it's magic, obviously.
It's an anti-diabetic medication used for the treatment of type 2 diabetes.
All right. Well,
but the commercial goes, oh ho ho, Ozempic. Yeah. Very tasteful.
Yes. Well, it'll buy a couple of bottles of wine, I'm sure. So that's all right. So this is around the time when you met Eric Wolfson, or did you already know him but then started hanging out with him a bit more?
I'd already had a hit with Magic by the time I met Eric. But yeah, he came along, right around the time of Magic being on the charts.
Right. And I love the fact that, so just in case people don't know, so Eric was basically your partner in the Alan Parsons project for many years. But I love the fact that he had this vision of, in the movies, it had gone from the stars, the actors being the stars, to having star directors with Kubrick and with Hitchcock and things like that. And he felt like the music industry, either it was going to happen or it could happen, and saw you as a producer who would be within that kind of mold in the record industry. It's a really interesting take on things.
I think it was, it stemmed from his degree in accountancy. I think it was, I think he saw dollar signs, pound signs, when the concept of the producer's album came up. So I think that was part of it. And the other thing was the choice of the subject for the first album, which was Edgar Allan Poe stories, or the life of Edgar Allan Poe. And when he had been studying marketing, he had noticed that no movie or, or film had featuring an Edgar Allan Poe story had ever lost money. So he thought, we'll make a record and hope
Really interesting. Wow. Well, I mean, he wasn't wrong, I suppose. But okay, but we're jumping ahead of ourselves a little bit, only because I mean, you did some more Paul McCartney and Wings, but another Pilot record, Al Stewart, and this is when he was managing you, right, as a producer. But one thing that happened, and I'm curious if he had really if he helped you make this decision, was when Pink Floyd came back and they were going to start Wish You Were Here and wanted you just to engineer again, because again, they were going to self-produce. They were not going to have a producer, and you turned it down. And Dark Side of the Moon, I mean, it already had like, you don't know anything's going to have the success that it ended up having, but it was doing all right at that point. And I'm curious about the decision-making to decide, like, no, I'm not going to go take a step back to engineer, no matter how big the band is. I'm a producer now.
Yeah, that was it. And Eric and his business partner at the time, Robin Britton, had a meeting with Steve O'Rourke, Pink Floyd's manager, and we basically made the decision. Alan's production career is off to a really good start. He, like you said, he doesn't want to take a step backwards, but it was a difficult decision because their offer was extraordinary. I mean, it was a really high salary that they were offering to me to record their next album, be their live sound engineer, effectively to be on their staff.
Right.
But I turned it down. Yeah, and I don't regret it. I mean, I regret that we didn't work together again. I mean, I think we were an excellent team. And I regret that we did not do another record, but I made the right decision not to work for them full time. That's for sure.
Well, and it took them quite a while to have an outside producer too. So it's not like, well, if you'd stuck around for one more record, you would have been producing. But it took them a while. So it's a very bold decision. But I think whenever I talk to people, which is once a week, there seems to always be something somewhere in the career, which is that it's not a leap of faith really, but it's just this decision about, no, this is the path I'm on, and not to get distracted. I mean, because it's almost like a magpie with something really, really shiny. Like, you couldn't get shinier than that, but still it would have been a distraction in a way. So, all right. Indeed. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, that was an excellent speech you just made.
Well, but we're not here for me to talk. So, okay, let's talk about, you mentioned in one of the lists you sent me that we should talk about Bohemian Rhapsody in the context of Pilot.
It was interesting that the Bo Rap video, which was extraordinary. I mean, nobody had ever seen anything like it before. Did coincide with the big period for Pilot. I think when they were doing Killer Queen, I think that was on the same edition of Top of the Pops, the big British pop chart show. I think Killer Queen and January were on the same show.
Right.
Then Bohemian Rhapsody just took the world by storm, and everybody started making really adventurous videos. And I think I spent a brief period in the early 80s getting much more involved in video myself, but I just didn't really have the necessary chops to be a creative video director. I learned all the techniques and the engineering side of video, but I just didn't have the creative visual mind to be successful at video directing.
Well, you can't be good at everything. You've got to leave something for other people. So I'm sure there's some video directors kind of thankful. All right. So
Yes, well, I mean, there are a lot of jobs to be done, and I write, I produce, I engineer, and I on most occasions I've also done my own business. So I do wear a lot of hats.
It's pretty extraordinary. And that's one of the things I wanted to ask about. So you get to making the first, what turns out to be the Alan Parsons Project record. So this is the Edgar Allan Poe Tales of Mystery record. You'd said through school, while you were still playing in bands, you were never writing. When did you start writing? Because I mean, you're a co-writer on that entire record. It's not like you showed up just to produce and then sort of progressed from there. You were a musician and a writer from day one on that project.
Right. I'd done a bit of songwriting before I met Eric. I did get a couple of songs released, but no great success. But they were pop songs that I'd written, whereas the idea of writing pop songs for an Edgar Allan Poe album seemed inappropriate. So it was a new direction to take my writing, and Eric was a very talented songwriter in his own right. We did in the early stages work together. In fact, we went to a studio in North London to put down some rough demos of a couple of the songs in the early stages. But it became more that there were his songs that I would restructure or through production have a compositional element added to them. And it was always an agreement that whatever contribution either of us did, that it would always be split down the middle. It would always be 50-50. And
which is a very healthy way to structure things.
It is. But it sometimes frustrates me, and I'm sure it frustrated him too. There were occasions where I would do very little on one of his songs. And arguably, not arguably, it's proven to be the biggest Alan Parsons project hit of all time is Sirius, and that was totally my composition, very little to do with Eric. So I think we both probably got frustrated by the fact that it was 50-50 all the way through, but it was the healthiest and most sensible way to treat things.
Right.
Sure.
And I've had other producers say that sometimes being a really great producer is realizing that you don't need to do anything. So it's not like you didn't listen to it on the ones you didn't do a lot. It's that it didn't need anything doing to it.
Yeah.
So,
right.
Yeah. So fair enough. Now, when you were working on this, well, first of all, the decision to call it the Alan Parsons Project, was this just the sort of ultimate version of his idea of the producer as icon and artist?
The expression, the Alan Parsons Project, was coined literally as the artwork was being assembled, and the record was in production. It was the record executive at 20th Century Fox Records, Russ Regan, who said, "Everybody's been calling this the Alan Parsons Project, this thing. Why don't we just make it the name of the artist?" And that's what it became. It was just literally, how is Alan's project coming? How is the Alan Parsons Project? Oh, the Alan Parsons Project is doing really well. It's almost finished. But it became the identity of an artist, and no one was more surprised than I was when Clive Davis, when he signed us for the second album, that the name stuck. I still regarded it as being one album, the Alan Parsons Project.
Right. And Eric was cool with that?
Yeah, he was fine with it. He had said in interviews leading up to his death, sadly, in '09, letting Alan be the star of the show was my best ever decision, and also my worst ever decision, because he obviously didn't get the name recognition that I did.
Well,
But it was considered to be a two-man band.
yeah.
It was not anything more than a duo. The Alan Parsons Project was a duo, and we took on whatever musicians were necessary to create the sound that we achieved.
Right. And it was quite a bit of the band was Pilot, right? They were the rhythm section.
Yeah, yeah. It seemed obvious at the time that a band that had played together knew each other well, and knew that I could get on with them, they could get on with me. It worked out really well, and Ian Benson, the guitar player, stuck with us right through on every album.
Right.
And David Payton for most of the albums. But no, it was an ideal situation to have a self-contained band be our rhythm section. It worked well.
So you mentioned when Clive signed you for a second record. How long did that take? And because you went straight back to producing other people's records, right? Because an Al Stewart record, Year of the Cat, was then a John Miles record. But how long did it take before you realized, oh, this is actually going to be a thing?
Well, I think when Clive Davis called us and said, I want to meet you for lunch and sign you, I said, oh my God, this is it. We're in the major league now, and it was a great feeling, because the first album had done okay. It didn't really set the world like successive albums did.
Right. But of course, that was a time when it wasn't expected that you would have a smash hit with your first record. People were actually developing careers to a point.
Yeah.
They like a smash hit on the first record, but there are plenty of bands that got to make a second record. Were you sort of hoping that it would continue, or did you really think this is just, well, we made that record, that was cool, and now I'll keep doing what I'm doing?
I really can't remember what my attitude was back then. I think I was just so utterly chuffed by the fact that we got the call from Clive,
right,
saying, I want to sign you. I'm not sure if we'd given any consideration at all to recording another album at that time. I don't think we had.
Right.
I think, the recording of iRobot started after we signed with Clive.
Right.
As I remember.
And the songwriting started then too, or was there a batch of songs that you could at least draw from?
I don't seem to remember we had anything ready to go.
Right.
Until we'd signed with Clive. And at that point, that's when I started writing for sure. So.
Right. And did you worry at all about the balance between that and your production career, or it just, I guess if you're getting signed as an artist, you're getting signed as an artist, that's what you're going to do. There's not much thought to really put into it at that point, is there?
Yeah, the Alan Parsons Project, for me as producer, was just another act that I was producing.
Right.
I had my name on it, happened to be involved in songwriting, happened to be doing oohs and ahs and playing acoustic guitar occasionally. But it was just a production job like anything else. We didn't have a live act. We resolved not to play live. So I was always available to work with others. Al Stewart was one of them. Just one job essentially. Just
right.
Producing other acts and producing the Alan Parsons Project. It's just another act that I was producing.
And was there any pressure from Clive and the label for you guys to play live? Because obviously there was always a big part of promotion for records, but
No, the main pressure from Clive was to be, more commercial. Let's have a smash single
Right.
on
So
the album.
not another one about Edgar Allan Poe then.
So yeah, he would get involved in edits and how to make the songs work on radio.
Right.
Um, but he has that knack. He knows exactly what makes a hit record.
Right.
Uh, I mean, he's been proven over and over again to this day that he can pick a hit. He is.
So when was the first time that you did play live? Was it way down the road then?
Way down the road, long after Eric and I parted company. I
Right.
made an album in 1995 uh, with Ian, the guitar player that I mentioned, played
Yeah.
on all the projects. Stuart Elliott, the drummer, Andrew Powell, the arranger and keyboard player. So those three and I uh, went into my newly built studio in Sussex in the south of England, and we made an album called Try Anything Once.
Yeah.
And once it was completed, we decided to take it on the road and give it every possible chance in the stores.
Right.
And it it wasn't a failure, but it wasn't anything like the success that the Alan Parsons Project albums had had.
Right. So 20 years in though, that's a long time to be an artist and not tour ever. That's got to be a record. I think you and XTC kind of it. So, okay, so going back to, I mean, I just sort of skipped over Year of the Cat, which is a bit ridiculous. So we should talk about Al Stewart for a minute.
Did you freeze again?
No.
I think.
Oh,
Oh,
oh no.
oh! I thought you'd frozen because I thought you were going to ask me a question about Al Stewart. But
Well,
did you?
no, I mean, not anything specific really. No, I mean, this is more I say Al Stewart, you say. It's,
Okay. Al was absolutely an ideal artist for me. I'd had a lot of interest in what became known as folk rock. I used to go to the folk clubs in Soho in London to see acts like Al, Roy Harper, Ralph McTell was another, Bert Janssen, John Renbourn, who were two amazing guitarists that formed a band called Pentangle. Yeah, Al, I was a fan of Al's music, and we were introduced by a mutual friend who happened to work at Abbey Road, and it really clicked. We made 3 albums altogether. The first album is actually my favorite, which is called Modern Times.
mhm.
I just think some of the songs on Modern Times were of a very high standard, but it was Year of the Cat that put him on the map, really. Despite its enormously long duration, it managed to get radio play, and what is it, 6.5 minutes or something?
I think something. Yeah, which of course is nothing in comparison to other things that were getting airplay around the time. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was. It was fun. It was fun to do. We also did well with the third album I did with Al, Time Passages. That had a good size hit with the title track. And I'm still in touch with Al. We did a cruise, a sort of all-star cruise a couple of years ago. There was meant to be one at the end of last year, but with the coronavirus, that didn't happen. It's been postponed until sometime next year, I think. And I think Al's doing it again.
Right.
And he also played at my 70th birthday party. So
Nice.
which was very nice. Yeah.
That's excellent. And another artist that right around the same time, working with John Miles, who, again, you've put music on your list, which Mark's going to share your lists. And we didn't censor your list. So you put like 900 songs on your inspiration list, and they're all great. So they're all on there. They're all staying. But on the ones you made, that's one of the songs that you mentioned.
Yeah, that was another epic, long, a long single, which for some reason Radio One was okay with in the UK, and it did it incredibly well. It was top three, I think. Didn't quite make number one. But John is a remarkable artist. He's another guy that I'm still very much in touch with. He's been doing this big event in Belgium and Germany called the Night of the Proms, and he's sort of mainstay of that event every year. And music is kind of the anthem to that show.
Right.
He does it every year. It was just a song from heaven as far as I was concerned. Lots of changes, lots of interesting riffs and melodies, and it was fun. It was really fun to work on. One little side note. There was a string line which he had on his original demo in a dramatic section where it goes dun 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 dun, and then he'd written this string line which went da 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 da. I said, wait a minute, that's nice in my Saturn. You can't use that. So all we did was take it from a minor change into a major change, so it became da 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 da, which takes it away from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was a slight worry, and I think we actually made that change on the session when the strings were there.
But of course, the Parsons code version, it would have said it's the same melody in a way. So you could have gotten in a lot of trouble there.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
John's a remarkable singer, and we worked together. He sang several songs for the Alan Parsons project, as well as the couple of albums that I did with him as his producer.
Right. So then you're still, Alan Parsons Project is cranking out a record every year, as prolific artists did. But I was looking at the charting for them, and it's really weird. Like, you would have, one of your records would be big in Austria and Germany, and then the next record would be big in New Zealand, or the first one was bigger in New Zealand. Do you have any idea why? I mean, and these are charting relatively high in those areas, but it wouldn't really spread out. It seems really odd that you would find these localized markets, but they were different for every record. Do you have any idea about that, or am I just spouting numbers that I saw on the internet?
It was always, of course, very pleasing that we would hit the chart in any country. I can't explain why some records were more popular in some countries than others. I would choose to say it was down to the marketing rather than anything to do with the taste of the public in those. We did have an incredible success in Germany and Austria. Eve went to number one in Germany. We had a hit single from Eve called Lucifer, which was also number one in Germany. And it's still being used on a news program in Germany. That song, Lucifer.
Wow. That's a good run, because that was 1979. So
I can't explain why we had success in some countries more than others. Strangely, we had a huge success in France with a hits album, and not such great success with the individual albums.
Right.
But that has to be down to marketing rather than anything to
do. Or possibly some licensing, like you say, you get it onto a news program and it's a mainstay, then that can help, or advertisements and things like that. Because I think you're pretty good at getting your songs used too, and plus sampled like crazy. I mean, you're listed as a composer on hundreds and hundreds of records.
Why there is this desire on the part of hip hop and rap artists to sample the Alan Parsons Project amazes me. I have no idea why that would be.
You could write a hook.
The biggest sample, of course, the biggest sample use is Sirius, which was written literally as an intro to another song called Eye in the Sky. And it just exploded as a sports team anthem.
Yeah.
Started with Michael Jordan and the Bulls, of course.
Right, and then got used to one of the Super Bowls as well, right?
Yeah, the year the New Orleans Saints won the Super Bowl.
Right.
That was the walk-on music that year, so that was nice. But commercials, we've been in a Purdue chicken commercial. We've been in a Papa John's pizza commercial. We were in the movie Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs with it. Just keeps getting licensed.
Yeah.
Over and over again. I mean, literally once every 2 weeks, I get a request for a license.
That's amazing. I mean, I think it comes down because obviously the songwriting is really, really strong, but the ability to build a mood. I mean, and like that it's almost as though you write it, it feels like something, people latch onto it, and then it becomes kind of like what you would see in a dictionary next to a picture, next to the definition of that type of music. It's like that bit right there is the archetype now for that triumphant, firing people up moment. So if you aren't going to use that, you're going to try and rip it off, basically. So.
Yeah, I mean, what do you call it though? Is it rock? Is it progressive rock? Is it pop? I mean, you know, I was almost surprised that we were classified as progressive rock.
Yeah, that doesn't seem.
I mean, it was adventurous. It was, you know, would have lots of changes within a song, and not be frightened to have the occasional 2/4 bar or the occasional 5/4 bar or whatever. But that was not what progressive rock was all about. It was part of it was about that. But I think we were more song oriented than people perhaps gave us credit for.
Yeah, well, I mean, to me, it feels very much more like you talk about your love of the folk rock scene, and that people think of that as 2.5-minute songs, and I'll tell you a story. But we're talking about the people who are writing the 6.5-minute epic songs that had lots of different sections, and you guys were the electric stadium-sized version of that kind of songwriting, I think.
And that's the very reason we didn't play live, because it was such a big sound and so heavily orchestrated. It really would have been quite difficult to pull it off, especially with the technology at that time, mainly keyboard technology. I mean, storing a sound on a synth was a major operation.
Right, that involved a cassette.
Yeah, and when MIDI came into its own and programmable synthesizers became more commonplace, that it was really only then that we felt comfortable putting on a live show. And orchestral samples have improved enormously over the years, so we can emulate the sound of an orchestra, and we have done shows with orchestra. We did a full-blown symphonic concert in Columbia, which is in the shops as we speak.
Right.
That's out there. And we've got another one coming out this year, recorded in Tel Aviv with the Israel Philharmonic. So look out for that.
That's great. It's almost like you've just decided to do the career in 2 stages. I'll do the whole recording part first. Now we'll do the whole live part.
Yeah, interesting observation. That's fairly true. Fairly true.
It's really interesting, and it gives it gives the live thing a life of its own because it isn't tied to a record. You're not pushing the latest thing and then the set list has like, oh, here are the old favorites, but now we're going to play the new record. And it's whatever you make of your entire catalog every time you go out and do a show. And the fact you do them different settings with different bands and strings, and it's a kind of a lot of freedom for putting these shows together because it's not tied to promoting a particular thing.
Right. We are actually, when we eventually get back into touring again, we're hoping that we will be in Spain in July, and in America in August and September. We are actually calling the tour the Turn of a Friendly Card Anniversary Tour.
Right.
Which means we'll play the whole piece of the Turn of a Friendly Card. We've done it before, but we're dedicating this to the occasion of the anniversary.
Right.
Which was 35 years ago.
It's I mean, there's so many bands that have been able to do that, and it's always incredible when a record that you remember everything about it, and it's like, oh yeah, it is the 30th anniversary. Oh, it's the 50th anniversary. Like that just seems impossible. But it was an era of record making that, I mean, I love a lot of the music that's coming out now, and I love the trends in music making and the democratization of it so everybody can make records, and there's some really weird records coming out, which is great. But that was when people figured out how to make records for the first time, and there's something about it that's very sticky to me.
So, what is it in particular you find?
Well, I think it's just it's interesting how many records from the sort of, I mean, obviously the Beatles records, but going from the 70s, I mean, if you just took the decade of the 70s, how many records there are from that decade that you could easily tour an anniversary of right now, and lots and lots of people would go see it. And as many cool records as...
So you're drawing attention to the fact that there was a very popular period in the early to late 70s where a lot of those acts have survived.
The acts have survived and the records still stand up. And I mean, and everybody says it about their time, like, well, I don't think anyone's going to be humming this 20 years from now or whatever. But it does feel as though with the saturation and how much stuff there is, that there won't be the same kind of... it's going to be hard to take a victory lap 20 years from now on a record that's come out now. There are very few of them. There are one or two a year that are absolute standout, gigantic records, and everybody else there's some great music, but I just don't think things stand out in the same way. And I'm just blabbing, I don't know. I've just made this up, but
I think the megastars of today. I mean, the true megastars of today. I mean, Taylor Swift, Beyonce, Adele, all those spring to mind. I think they'll still be around, but perhaps not those in the lower reaches of the charts. I mean, I'm almost embarrassed every time I pick up a copy of Billboard and look at the chart, and I actually haven't heard of half the people in the top 20. I mean, literally, not even heard of them.
And then you get down to Dark Side of the Moon.
It's embarrassing. Yeah. Oh, that's down at number 198 or something, isn't it now?
Well, but those charts
it did have a good run. It has to be said.
Yes. I mean, and the charts are very different now too, because I mean, I think now the fact that it's still a top 200 is insane. I can't imagine that the 200th record any week is selling more than 1,000 copies. It's impossible. So it doesn't mean much. So as much as a shame as that is,
and it's probably being listened to on an MP3 player.
Yes,
or a phone.
I would say almost definitely. Well, not even. Yeah, it's going to be the phone. It's going to be streaming. But
I'm embarrassed when my wife has two daughters, and they literally listen to music on the speaker on their phone.
Yeah,
and it's terrible. It's just, why do we do this?
But that said, I've experienced recently, though, there are still some records that sound amazing coming out of a phone speaker. Like, they still work. Dark Side of the Moon is one of them. There are records that that work. It's not how you
I
would
still have
like
to,
people to
I still
listen
have
to
to check.
you.
I actually have to check that out. I haven't heard Dark Side on there.
Dark Side and Back in Black. It's impossible to find somewhere where those aren't good.
Interesting. Wow.
Whereas there are a lot of really fantastic sounding records that can't survive that because almost too much dynamic range. You're left with just the vocal. Things like a lot of the classic Sinatra records, you can't hear anything but him once you take away some of the hi-fi experience. So anyway, why am I talking about this? I have no idea. So once you really got going with, so obviously when you started off, you didn't even know you were going to make a second record, but then it became obvious that the Alan Parsons Project was going to be a thing, and you're turning out a record a year. And did you consciously decide to not really pursue as many production projects as well, or did you just not have time because of how much time was getting put into Alan Parsons Project?
I think it was mostly a shortage of time. Yes, I mean, we didn't exactly record quickly. I mean, we would spend several months making a record, and then we would go out and do radio promotion. That was the substitute for playing live. We would go and do radio tours, go around America to classic rock stations and do little interviews, little appearances.
Right.
But never a live performance. Not once. Not even Eric sitting at the piano playing a song. We didn't even do that.
Did it become
So
a conscious decision to just never, ever, ever perform it?
I think it was a conscious decision. So we are a recording outfit. There is no live show here.
Right.
That was the decision. The decision at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing to have such a long, steady career without what most people would say is the backbone of a long, steady career, you know? Because there are plenty of bands who've had long careers, but they'll have a clunker somewhere in the middle. But it won't matter because the tour is everything they've done. They'll play it all, and then the fans are all still there psyched up. Whereas you've managed to sustain your fan base all the way through without any of that, which is pretty impressive.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that you think that's the case. We don't sell. We don't. I mean, I haven't managed to sell my solo, what I call solo records, to anything like the number of people that we sold the Alan Parsons projects to. But we have a good following live, and the live show is essentially the hits of the Alan Parsons project. That's what they want, you know. So we've got a good live following, but and you know the APP albums still get downloaded. We still do reasonably well with the past albums.
Well, so then within all of this, you still did a few productions, like early on. I mean, I think this is before you'd really decided, okay, this was it, because you did a Marvin Hamlish record, another John Miles record, but then much later on, you did, well, first of all, the Freudiana record, which I'd love to talk about a little bit, because obviously this was sort of, not obviously, I'm asking the question, this was like Eric's sort of bookend to the Edgar Allan Poe project in a way.
I think when it started life as another project album, it was based upon the work of Sigmund Freud. Then this musical producer called Brian Boley heard it and said, "I want to make this into a stage musical." So at that point, it became a double album. We wrote a whole bunch more, or Eric wrote a whole bunch more songs, and it is sadly what contributed to our breaking up. He wanted full credit for all the writing on Freudiana, even though the basis upon which we had worked over the years was still the same. I mean, nothing changed between the previous project albums and Freudiana. But the show went on. It was in a famous theatre in Vienna, ran for a full year. But then Brian Bolly and Eric had a huge falling out and ended up in court, and it was all terribly nasty.
Ugh.
And it was during that period when he was in court with Broly that I decided to make my first album without him.
Right.
Because I needed to. I was bored. I had nothing else to do except make a record. So,
right.
So that's what.
Right. So without that project, most likely you would have continued. Well, I can't use the word project because that means Alan Parsons Project. So without that record, most likely Alan Parsons Project would have continued, or did things seem to be going in that direction anyway?
I think it was to a certain extent in decay to a certain degree. Yes, I found it more and more difficult to work with Eric in the later years. But it's like every other band. You spend too long with the members of a group or a band, and things go stale. It's like a failed marriage.
Well, I mean, and you've got as big a discography as most bands, so it's not like, oh well, you didn't really try. So so you get into doing your solo records, but then there's some production that's it's more recent that I wanted to ask you about. But I don't even know. Let's just talk about your solo records first, because obviously, as you've said, the live component becomes more of a thing then. So how did getting the live band together then drive the records? And I'm curious because there are lots of guest artists, obviously, but all those guest artists aren't going to tour. So then you end up putting a band together. And did that really shape the albums, or was it always just the concept of you were writing, you're producing, you're going to get whoever you want on these records? Because I know, like when PJ Olson shows up, he's sticky, he's stuck around and is the singer live and things like that, and then ends up featured more on the records. But what was your concept for the Alan Parsons solo albums?
Really, just to attempt to prolong the success that we'd had with the Alan Parsons Project. Freudiana, kind of held things up, and there was no realistic prospect of working with Eric again on another album, at least in the immediate future. So the Try Anything Once album was an attempt to keep my name out there. It was still on Clive's label. It was still on Arista, so it was well received there. But it did not set the world alight. Unfortunately, we tried hard to get a single called "Turn It Up" to be a success, but it was another act on the label called the Crash Test Dummies were getting all the radio play at the time.
Yes.
Then the next two albums, Time Machine and On Air, again just an attempt to keep the Parsons sound alive, and I think most people have said that the sound is there. The songwriting style might be a little different, but I think some people, myself included, missed Eric's songwriting style being a part of those three albums.
Right. And then A Valid Path is, I should know this because that's the one PJ's singing on quite a bit, and it's got co-writes with Eric. So I'm just being ignorant now. So are these older songs, or did you actually work with Eric on that?
We did a remake of oh God, what song was it? It just can't, if I had the album cover in front of me, I'd remember. But yeah, we remade one of the Parsons project
Right.
tracks.
Okay. So it wasn't new working with him.
No, it wasn't.
Then, no. No.
Well, that would explain the Wolfson credit.
Right. So, did you feel at any point, because obviously you've had such success as an artist, but you had a huge success earlier on as a producer. Did you? And you could have like just stepped back into full-time producing other people's records probably at any point and would have been in high demand. Do you think that would have felt like a step backwards the way engineering the Floyd record instead of producing at that point would have been? Or do you see those two things as separate enough that it's not a lesser role?
I still feel the same way as I always have, that making a record with my name on it is simply another production job.
Right.
And never more so than the last album we did that called The Secret. My live band literally submitted their best songs, and we made it a sort of band effort, which worked. I mean, I'm pleased with it, but you know, commercial success is one thing, and quality is another.
Yes, and very often have nothing to do with each other. But you've been really selective with your productions, but I wanted to ask you about a couple of them. So Jake Shimabukuro, how did that come about, and what was your take on him as an artist? Because he's obviously carving out a very narrow niche in what he's doing, but in a very broad way. And what did you see in him as an artist that made you want to work on it? And was there anything you were trying to bring to him at that point?
I first saw Jake in a little theater in Santa Cruz, California, at the recommendation of the son of my partner in crime on my video series called The Art and Science of Sound Recording. We should talk about that at some point.
Yes, absolutely.
But he said, "You must come and see this amazing ukulele player." And I went, "I'm going to sit watching a ukulele player play for an hour and a half, solo, no band." And he said, "Yes, but you must do it." And of course, he was absolutely extraordinary. Have you ever managed to see him?
I haven't seen him live. No. I mean, I've heard some of the records. I've not seen live though.
He's a great personality. He's an incredible talent. He turns the ukulele into a massive instrument just by his skill. Anyway, I approached him, soon after that show where we'd seen him, and said, "I would love to make a record with you," and he jumped at the chance, and we made an album called Grand Ukulele. And I haven't seen him for a while, but we're good friends. He appeared on The Secret on a classical piece that we revamped for the album. It was a remake of The Sorcerer's Apprentice. He did a little bit appearance on that.
Right.
Great artist, and he gave me a wonderful freedom in production, and I got my good friend. My good friend.
This is what happens when people talk to me for a couple hours.
Hold on a second. Let me.
Yep.
Take it.
Hydrate. Regroup.
Okay. Like I said, cut the previous section. I had an incredible degree of freedom with Jake. I mean, I think until that time had only ever literally done solo ukulele stuff. But I suggested that some of the tunes would do well to have orchestration, and I called Kip Winger up, who's been a long-standing friend, to ask him to write some arrangements. believe it or not, one of the songs was Over the Rainbow, Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
Right. Yeah.
Did a wonderful job on that, and on a couple of others as well. So it gave Jake the opportunity to play with orchestra for the first time, and I think he enjoyed that experience.
Well, it definitely opened him up. I mean, his latest album is a trio record, almost like a traditional jazz setting. So.
Oh right.
And it's
right. I've yet to hear that.
It's I think like your reaction to someone saying you're going to come listen to an hour and a half of ukulele. I'm sure live you could go for 6 hours and it'd be fine. But after a while, if you're listening to, like, if you try to listen to 2 records in a row, it's like, well, okay, that instrument, even in his hands, has a range that you start to feel like, okay, I've heard a lot of ukulele. But as soon as you add that orchestration, it takes it off into so many different places. It really opens him up. And not that he needed it necessarily, but it does. It really, really highlights him in a great way.
Indeed. I hope that we can make another sometime.
Yes. All right. I want to ask you about someone
Andrew,
else.
I'm just going to take a quick pee break.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
I'll be right back.
All right. What can I show you guys? You've seen the screwdriver. That's it. I mean, I got, well, let me think. I got this pencil. You've seen the pencil from other shows. I got a tape measure, empty beer bottle. Got some vitamin C. I don't know if it's in date though, so I'm not sure how effective it would be. Wow. Oh, you guys might have noticed the new cat tree, which replaced the ladder under a quilt. The cats are supposed to use that to jump up to that beam, which one of them did not too long ago. They're not used to it yet, so they don't use it. They still climb on the modular synth and then go up. But I'm hoping that they'll use that cat tree. But that is a new addition to the studio. So the cats now have as much custom furniture in the studio as I do, which I don't know what that says about me, but, whatever. It's all something in it. But it's quite nice. You can see it has a nice paw print down there. It's got what they call a condo, that's the opening they can climb into. Then a hammock, which they hate and they're too big for. And then the platform up top, which they're not really sure about because the outside is padded but not solid. Kind of freaks them out. But I'm hoping the more it smells like them, the more they'll use it. So that's the mole and squid update. Pretty exciting. Yeah. The weather's warm here at the moment, which is good. Yeah. Nothing like doing this solo with no feedback. It's the best. You guys should try it sometimes. Just sit in a room by yourself and try and be interesting. I think I hear him. So we won't be alone for much longer, which is for the best. One can hope. But hopefully, guys, get your questions in. Hey, Mark.
Hey.
You've come to save me.
Yeah, I just thought I'd pop in to say what you just said, which is to everybody that's in the Crowdcast room, make sure you guys get your questions in for the Q&A later.
Yeah, because we got a few other things to talk about, but I think we're getting not too far from Q&A time. So yes, get your questions in the question thing, not in the chat thing, and then upvote them. And then Mark will read your question, and then Alan will answer your question, most likely.
Awesome. Everybody's having a great time in there. I'm going to let you guys get back to it. But I think it's good in case you get another break. Michael Jung would like to hear you sing 99 Bottles next time.
That's not going to happen because there is only one bottle in the room. So it'll be very short. Right. It'll be the shortest version possible.
Perfect.
All right.
All right. I'll let you guys get back to it.
Excellent. Excellent. Welcome back. I was just boring them with my new cat tree that's in here for the cats. So I wanted to ask you about the couple of Steven Wilson records that you worked on, because he's the blurbs I'm sure are all hyperbole, like coaxed you out of semi-retirement to come and work on those records, and I'm sure it wasn't quite Like, you know, he didn't need a crowbar to do it. But I'm curious, like, what your take is on him as an artist, but also it's not just himself, because I think he's been sort of instrumental in really pushing things within the entire genre that he's in. It's not just about him as an artist, it's about him working on other people's records and going through other people's catalogs and mixing and things like that. And so I'd love to know your thoughts.
He's mixing all the records in surround that I wanted to mix in surround.
Yeah.
So we're a little bit in competition there. But Stephen is a remarkable artist. He is keeping what is genuinely prog rock alive, I think. And he approached me because he wanted to make an album, a prog album done the 70s way, you know. And that's exactly what we did. I came in and put my sort of 70s, 80s production hat on, and off we went. And I think we've got a really good result, I think.
Yeah. But I'm assuming you did not cut it to 16-track tape.
No, we did not. No, that was the one salute to current technology. We did use Pro Tools.
Yes.
But, you know, the miking technique was as it was back then, and yeah, I mean, we approached it, you know, the way it would have been, you know, all the band playing together.
Right.
So that was another requirement.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Because I think a lot of the newer prog bands actually don't really take that approach. It's very much written into a click, and they're very meticulous about getting parts and things like that. But that's not the way this was done.
No, it was a band playing, and an incredible band too. I mean, virtuoso players all round, really, really super. I would work with those guys again any day. Really, super band.
Right. And did you know going in that he was going to be mixing the record? Was that just always the way it was going to be, since he does so much mixing?
Yeah, I mean, I knew he was an engineer at heart, as well, you know, as well as I am. So yeah, I knew he would mix it. In fact, I tried to lay it out, you know, in such a way that would make it easier for him to mix.
Right.
But no, the band were extraordinary, particularly Marco, the drummer. Extraordinary player. And yep, I would jump at the chance to do it again. Right.
And it is that amazing, like, as soon as you hear the drums especially, it is very much that type of sound. But it's incredible how well a 70s type drum sound, which is not compressed, it's very open, stands up to how dense the music gets. Whereas, you know, these days you would be crushing room mics and doing things like that to really pump the drums up to have them keep up with things. But when you leave the space around everything, the drums keep up no problem. And it's really impressive, and something I need to spend more time doing.
I would like to ask him if he did any compression on the mix, because I like to think that he didn't.
It doesn't feel. I mean, whatever he did was pretty light-handed, if he did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm pleased with it, the way it turned out.
Excellent. So, do you want to talk a little bit about all the various studios you have built, including your most recent one?
Yeah, we could touch on that. I now live in the hills above Santa Barbara, and there was an outbuilding, probably 500 feet from the house, that was a shed, and we decided to extend that in all directions and have a full-blown studio with a relaxing area, kitchen, and a proper performance area. Before that, I mean, I've lived in this house for 15 years. Previous to that, where I'm sitting now was the studio, which is now a dining room. But it was just a very sort of simple makeshift studio with an O2R 96. But I think I told you before we went on the air that every time I've built a studio, I've said I'm not doing this again. I will never build another studio. But the one I built is a joy to work in. It has a wonderful 5088 Neve board in it.
Right.
Thanks, Rupert, for
Yes.
all you did to our industry.
Yes. Cheers. Cheers to Rupert.
Yeah, rest in peace. We did the last album here, The Secret. I'm hoping that everybody will be vaccinated soon and we can get back to work and start
Right.
recording again. I got my second jab last week, so I'm well on the way to.
Well done,
being
sir.
safe.
Well done.
The previous one to that was in the previous house that I had here in Santa Barbara, just after we moved here in the year 2000. That was just an in the box studio, which is where we did A Valid Path. So there was no console involved in that record at all. And on reflection, it was a little bit of a frustration that it was not hands-on enough. I didn't get to push faders up and down enough. The previous one to that was in the UK, in the south of England, and I had one not far away in Kent, where I had a big rock-style mansion called the Grange, and I built a full-blown studio there as well. But only made 2 records there. Gaudi for the Alan Parsons project and Freudiana.
Right.
And then it was time to move on. My boys wanted to go to school in a different area, and my wife wanted my boys to go to a different school out of the area. So we moved, and the studio was pulled down.
Right.
And I reinstalled it at the new place in Sussex. Before that, it was just really just Abbey Road and one other studio where I did an album called Mayfair. But home was Abbey Road for me.
Right.
I just thought there was no better place to record.
And just out of curiosity, which room would you have chosen, assuming they were all available?
Number 2.
Yeah.
The middle-sized one, the one most often referred to as the Beatles studio.
Yes, the Beatles room. I do have to say that, I mean, it's hard to get starstruck by a room, but the first time I got to walk in there, it wasn't just the look of it, because you've seen that a million times, but the sound of your voice coming back to your ears sounds like the early Beatles records. Yeah. And I'm sure I made that up because of the situation, but it really did feel like a very familiar sound.
I remember being surprised first time I walked in there. I thought all recording studios were going to be dead as a doornail, just completely like walking into a padded room, So I was quite surprised when there is aliveness to number 2. And of course, number 1 is ridiculously live, but has a magic. Number 2 really does has a certain sound. No question.
Yeah, definitely. So
you know what? I need to plug in my computer because it's saying low battery.
Okay.
1 second.
You do that.
And I hope the phone recording is going to not suffer the same fate, because I can't charge the phone at the same time as having the external.
You're using the jack. The problems with one port.
Right.
Well, it'll be fine. So look, I wanted to ask you about, because you've been mixing.
Still showing as recording. So
excellent. You've been mixing in 5.1 for quite a while, right? And I'm curious, first of all, what got you into that, how you still feel about that format, and if you are, what you feel about the Atmos music that's now sort of exploding to the point where I have just taken delivery of pallets of speakers because I'm going to set up for the Atmos thing. But I'm really curious, as someone who's been doing this quite a bit, what your take is on immersive formats, to use the the term.
The new Grammy expression for
Yeah.
what it all is. Um, just before I go back to the roots of my interest in surround, um, I think it's kind of lamentable that we have this immersive category at the Grammys now. I feel strongly that there should be a surround category and an immersive category that deals with the likes of all the headphone systems that are out there right now.
Right.
I think Dolby Atmos, yes, okay, that's surround. But yeah, I've yet to really experience Dolby Atmos, I have to say. I'm interested to hear you're putting all these speakers up. How many speakers are you going to put up?
It's a lot. The room, it'll be 914, so 4 overhead and a ring of 9. Because if you go less than 9, you can't really certify the room properly, and then you get into trouble trying to deliver things to people. So this room is small enough that 714 probably would have been fine, but yeah, 914. And I have not done a lot. I've been messing around in the binaural, but I've just got the left, center, right set up yesterday. So it's, it's coming. But what interests me is the binaural component combined with things like the Apple technologies, which are trying to give you some sort of placement within your listening, whether you're listening to stereo or an immersive thing. So it feels like that's viable. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to ask you about 5.1 was that the thing about 5.1 is if you didn't have a 5.1 setup, you just couldn't listen to it, period. And there's this promise of being able to at least somewhat experience what people are trying to do with the Atmos, no matter what your listening environment is. Now, how good that is I don't know yet, but that feels better to me in a way. It's less repeatable and less knowable what people are going to experience, but more people might experience something.
I watched a movie the other day, believe it or not, just watching it on a laptop, and the surround experience was extraordinary, just coming out of the laptop speakers. I'd never heard anything quite like it.
Well, that's promising.
Yeah. But I promised I'd go back to the roots. I did mix Dark Side of the Moon in quad,
right,
4.0, and it got a lot of attention. In fact, it was heavily bootlegged until it was finally released on a what they called immersive edition. Nothing to do with immersive sound, just another use of the word immersive. I was, I was proud of it. I managed, believe it or not, to do the mix without any other help other than Peter James, the assistant engineer. I loved it. I loved the whole concept of doing it in quad. We designed the album around the quad format.
Right.
When we did the money loop, it was designed to go round and around the room. The clocks are totally recorded on 4 tracks as well, so that they're coming at you in all directions. I first mixed the on-air album. That was the first time I did one of my own albums. Since then, I've done Tales of Mystery in surround and Eye in the Sky. Eye in the Sky, I'm very pleased to say, won a Grammy.
Yes.
At the last event, which was very nice. I just love the format. I just love placing things in 4 places instead of 2. I just enjoy listening to music that way.
I think a lot of us do. I mean, because I've always loved even the stupid sound effect, like the binaural sound effect records. The idea of creating something that isn't there, and whether you do it with the actual speakers or whether you do it with psychoacoustics or whatever, I think a lot of engineers are really into the idea of that.
I think the word binaural is being abused. I think binaural should mean either a dummy head,
yes,
or a pair of microphones trying to emulate the sound of the human hearing. I think it's been used beyond that basic meaning. I think that's very confusing.
Yeah, I was talking about those 70s binaural, like you're getting a haircut in headphones.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Ringo. Remember Ringo?
Yeah.
That was Hugo Zuccarelli was the binaural head guy.
Yes.
So,
yeah. We talked about him a couple weeks ago.
His head was called Ringo.
Yeah.
All right, look. Saying, Ringo, he hear everything.
So we've managed to kind of plow through here. So we're going to get to some Q&A, and you'll still get to run your errands before you go to go. But before we get into third-party questions here, a young man named Robert Clearmountain has said to ask you about a boat ride. I don't know if this is going to ring a bell or not.
That's all he said.
That's all he said. He said, ask Alan about the boat ride. So at one point you were on a boat with Bob Clearmountain. I should have asked him to clarify. But it was so odd. It just took me by surprise. All right. Well, I've got to do a part two with Bob.
We've met a couple of times. We've met a couple of times outside professional environments, but no, you'll have to go back to him. I will write to Betty, his wife, and
yes,
and say ask what it's all about. I have no idea.
Ask him to explain. Well, and also I'll make him explain in part two of his interviews. So,
all right.
Excellent. Well, are you up for some Q&A?
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
Let's get Mark in here.
I might refill my water glass though.
Yes, absolutely.
Hello.
Hello.
This has been fun.
Yes.
All right. Let's see. There were some fun requests while you were in between breaks earlier. Lots of people want to hear more about the modular. They're ready for a modular episode.
Well, at some point, I guess we have to do an episode where I'm the one who's supposed to be talking, but
yeah,
that makes me uncomfortable. I talk way too much as it is on these, so yeah. And I always wonder, like, should I be editing that stuff out of the podcast? And most of me thinks no. I think I got to leave all that in.
Yeah.
Like, why clean it up?
Yeah. Chat room, what do you guys think?
What's funnier than awkward silence without picture? You know?
Yeah. Let's see. Adrian's asking if you're going to put gutters on that roof.
I'm back.
Excellent. Okay. You're saving us from ourselves here.
Hey. Awesome. This has been amazing, Alan. Thank you for your time for doing this.
Good. Thank you. It's been fun. Really.
Awesome. Okay. So how the queue, everybody in the chat room saying leave it all in.
Okay, good.
So there we go. Okay. So how the Q&A works is we're on a platform called Crowdcast in addition to YouTube and Facebook and all those things. But in the Crowdcast room, everybody can enter in their questions and then they can upvote each other's questions. So we typically start with the most voted up questions and go from there. So if you guys are on YouTube or Facebook, you can head over to Puremix, follow all the links, and you can submit some questions in Crowdcast. And we will start out with a question from Alejandro Alvarez. And Alejandro asks, what was your typical drum chain when mixing back in the 70s? Would you mix the same way now? Thanks.
My favorite jump chain, did you say?
Drum chain.
Drum chain.
Yeah.
I really haven't changed my technique on drums much since then. In fact, I'm still using ribbon mics as overheads. Cole's 4038, a pair of those overhead. The only real change I've made in recent years is going to a dynamic mic instead of a condenser mic on a snare drum. I used to favor the 84 on a snare, a Swarbite, but now I'm more like what everybody else is into, the 58, good old 58. Or is it 57? No, it's a 57.
57, yeah.
Yeah. Always get those two confused. I'm hopeless with numbers.
The
You
58's
ask me
bigger.
what is.
So
Yeah.
It's one more.
yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah.
But always dynamics on toms. I used to use D20 on kick, but now I use the is it the D110 or the AKG egg-shaped one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I use that because it sounds really good. Interestingly, I've been experimenting with a new principal drumhead, which is like uses the speaker cone principle, and it gives a really tight, great sound. I'm hoping people will take to it. It's currently called Speakerhead, but I think it's going to be. I think I'm going to suggest that they change the name.
And while you're answering a question like this, we should actually talk about the art and science of sound recording that you've done, because videos, courses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So please, let's talk about that, because I forgot to ask
Yes, I
you.
mean it started as a 7 part video series on 3 DVDs, and it's now developed into a full blown online recording course. So I'm hoping that if anybody's interested, they will go to www.artandscienceofsound.com and look it up. We'd be pleased to see you sign up with us. Very reasonably priced compared with any other school, and none of the schools are operating anyway right now.
Right. So, and there's some previews on YouTube that are great.
All right. Well, yes.
Awesome chat room. I'll link you guys.
We've tried to cover every aspect of recording and make it entertaining at the same time. That was the intention anyway. So.
Very cool.
Yes,
okay.
There's also a book of the same name, which is a sort of companion volume, if you like.
And so the question was about mixing drums, but can I assume that there is no chain for mixing drums? I mean, you talked about having almost like a parallel compression set up to decide whether or not you're going to use compressed drums on Dark Side of the Moon, but do you have a standard thing you do while you're mixing drums?
No, just balance. That's all. I normally before tracks became unlimited, I would record drums on 4 tracks: kick on 1, snare on 1, and stereo drums, everything else on a pair of tracks. So mixing essentially close mic toms with overheads, committing to that in the early stages.
Right.
And I think it's fair to say that the drum balance that I've had in the box coming back into the console, again 4 tracks: kick, snare, and rest. I think we've very rarely gone back to the tracks to change the balance once we found a satisfactory balance during the recording process.
Here's a question for you. Have you ever mixed anything that you haven't recorded?
Yes. Going way back, there were one of the tracks on Red Rose Speedway. I didn't
Okay, so it's been a while.
Yes, I'm trying to think if there has been anything else. I mean, there's been plenty of home recording stuff which I've helped people out on. But generally speaking, I think the answer is a pretty definite no to that question.
Which means, especially with the way you learn to record, mixing, like you say, it's a balance thing, it's effects, but it's not, okay, now what are the drums going to sound like? They've been sounding like they sounded because you tracked with them that way, and you've overdubbed to them, and that's the drums.
I'm somewhat famous for when during the mixing process. A trick that Jeff Emmerich told me. I start with everything but the drums, and then add them in. Most people start with the drums and then add everything on top of the drum. But I do it the opposite way around at mixing stage.
It's a really interesting concept, and the question I would want to ask is sort of irrelevant if you're not mixing other people's recordings, because for me, I'm always mixing other people's recordings, and wrangling the drums is the most difficult thing because they show up on the most tracks, dealing with phase issues and blah, 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 blah. So I almost have to start with the drums because I don't really have the drums until I've worked on them. But I actually really liking the idea of getting the drum kit together in a fashion, then just muting it, and then getting the track together and then bringing the drums back in. And obviously some things may need to change, but I really like that because I end up relying on the drums too much for power and things like that. And sometimes then you do lose what you could get out of the guitars or the piano or the voice.
It actually makes it fun as well, because when you sort of precision balance all the guitars, all the keyboards, vocals, etc. But then when you bring the drums in, hey, wow, it's sounding like a record now. It makes it really fun. I enjoy that.
But I also like when you were talking about this in another interview, it's not because it's this, I think there's even a name for it, the top-down approach, like starting with the lead vocal. You don't have the lead vocal in either. This is about balancing the band, right? And then the vocals, then the drums.
I would most likely bring the drums in before. I mean, I would look at the vocals, make sure that any backing vocals are well balanced and stuff. But I would probably give consideration to the rhythm section as a whole before putting the vocals in.
Okay, good. I now feel much better about myself. Because I do the same thing. I make sure that I know what the vocals are doing, and you sort of in your head automatically leave room. But you can't concentrate on anything else once the vocals are in. They're the vocals. So
True.
I tend to leave them pretty late. So, Okay, sorry. Moving on.
Awesome. Okay. We had this question last week, but I really like it. And Andrew, you probably have to answer again for anybody you didn't see last week.
Well, they're just going to have to watch the replay.
Right. This is from Tonio, and he says, first of all, hello, Alan and Andrew, from Tonio.
Hello.
And what music do you listen to nowadays?
I'm terrified to tell you that when I'm driving, I'm most likely to listen to a classic rock station or an oldies station. But of course, I try to keep up with what people are hearing. I think Adele is the most amazing artist that has happened for years and years and years. I'm enjoying Imagine Dragons, like them a lot. Tool, Coldplay, Radiohead. That's about as many current artists as I can think of at the moment.
It's a good list. So I have to say again, because last week I talked about
you mixed one of Alan's. So
well,
what was that, Mark? Say again.
He has to answer it, especially because he mixed the Adele stuff, or a lot of the Adele stuff, right?
I mixed some on 21. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But last week I mentioned Alan Johannes's record Hum, which I think is extraordinary. Also, Adrienne Lenker, who's the lead singer from Big Thief, her solo records are beautiful, just acoustic guitar voice for the most part. And then I remembered after the podcast there was another record I wanted to mention, and now I've forgotten it again. But it was another recent one that someone turned me on to. That's great. But I will also go back. Like I could listen to Stormcock anytime, the Roy Harper record, absolutely. And Dark Side of the Moon, I could listen to that anytime. I hadn't listened to it in a while, and while I was prepping, I wanted to watch that classic albums thing just to make sure I had that little bit of the interview right. And I thought, no, I'm going to listen to the record. And I just put it on. and listened all the way through. And it's such a great experience. It's such a beautiful example. I mean, everything that's great about it, but also of record making, the sequence, the side break is perfect. And, I actually went to master something, and on the floor was the 1/4-inch CD master where they had made the crossfade between side 1 and side 2 for the first time it was put out on CD, because of course that was the first time you would listen to the whole thing. And so the art of record making in that record is so strong, really great and inspirational. So yeah, everyone has to go listen to that.
Were you hearing it in your studio or in the car? Or?
No, I'm very lucky that my as happened back in the late 60s, my wife's mother took her and her brother to visit somebody in Westcliff-on-Sea. So they were gone for the weekend, and when they got back, her dad had bought a stereo. Like one of those, I'll never get away with this while everyone's home, but I'm doing it while they're gone. And he bought, among other things, a pair of Wharfedale speakers that are absolutely phenomenal. And so that is our stereo setup. I just have an old Marantz turntable and a relatively new preamp thing, and then a Macintosh amp and these speakers. And it's, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
So they're about this big?
No, they're the big ones. They're floor standing.
Oh.
I can't remember the model of them now, but they only sold them for a year or two. It's very weird. The tweeter and the mid-range are on a shelf at the top facing upwards into metal cones that disperse the sound. And you would think that would sound horrendous, but it's one of the most natural sounding pairs of speakers I've heard. They're really great.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Wharfedale were famous for bookshelf speakers, weren't they?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Though that and the acoustic research ones were sort of like the main sort of late 70s through the 80s.
I had a pair of those, and I gave them to the engineer at Real World, Peter Gabriel's studio.
It's amazing how many people made records with us. I first heard him making a record with Robin Millar, and then realized it must have been a really big thing in England in a certain time period, because lots and lots of engineers were using those.
Yep. Yeah, they were. Yeah, I mean, they were the predecessor to the NS10s, right?
They sounded so much better than NS10s, though.
Yes, they did.
I can't argue against NS10s because, Bob Clearmountain, but I still don't get them. Anyway. Moving on.
Awesome. Okay, our next question is from Omnigraph, and they ask, what was the most difficult or complex adaptation of the songs when going from the studio production to the stage with the project?
Is he looking for specific songs? Do you think?
Difficult. So it's worded, what was the most difficult, complex adaptation of the songs?
Anything that was heavily orchestrated was always a challenge. We did a song called "Silence and I" on "Eye in the Sky," and we just made the decision to not to attempt that song without a full-blown orchestra actually being there. So that's the only occasion that we've done that song. Having said that, we've got a brand new version coming out with the, as I mentioned earlier, with the Israel Philharmonic, recorded at a show in Tel Aviv in 2019, because nobody played last year, did they?
Right, no. Right. I think we're just going to call 2019 last year until we get to 2023 or so.
Yeah.
Do you use any pre-records at all, or do you try and stay away from that?
We try very hard not to use any samples. There have been one or two exceptions where we've got very, very complex BV parts. We'll cheat a little bit on those, but I'm kind of against using pre-recorded stuff.
Right.
So I think it's it's fooling. It's playing tricks on the audience. They're not really hearing what's happening.
Right.
Awesome.
I hope
Okay.
that answer about Silence and I was sufficient. Anything that's heavily orchestrated is a challenge to pull it off live. You know, we try and get the best orchestral samples we can, but there's still no substitute for the real thing.
Can I ask you about an orchestrally record that I wasn't necessarily going to bring up, but I'm curious about it because you engineered it, and I don't know how much involvement you had, but the Symphonic Music of Yes record, because it's an odd record, and I was wondering, it's hard to tell exactly, was any of the band stuff replayed, or is it orchestra played to an arrangement of tracks from those original recordings? Like, how is that put together?
It was all original. We started from scratch.
Right. Okay.
I've forgotten largely how the rhythm sections went. Is it possible that I think it's possible that maybe I did not do the rhythm section and I just did the
orchestra?
Orchestra overdubs. I'd have to listen to it again to be sure, but I know that John Anderson showed up on a couple of occasions, but he didn't do it. Of course, he didn't do any singing. Steve Howe showed up a couple of times. But they were not directly involved in the making of that record at all, I don't think.
Right.
They were just there to, to give encouragement.
Right.
Awesome.
All right, enough of my questions.
Would you guys like to do a desert island gear question?
Okay.
All right. Okay. It just moved on my screen. Where to go? Here we go. Okay. Fernandello asks, what are your 3 desert island pieces of gear? It can be microphone, preamp, compressor, EQ, tape machine, plugins, etc., which means anything.
I think probably the most recent desert island piece of gear would be Melodyne. It's got me out of trouble so many times. I think it's extraordinary. Favorite microphone, 47, always has been. It's always never ceases to amaze me how many microphones seem to be released every year purporting to be the latest, greatest microphone. Everybody still goes back to the 47. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I wish I had one. I'm waiting for one to fall off the back of a truck. Favorite compressors, limiter has always been Fairchild. Again, I wish I had one. I've been making good use of the Universal Audio 6176. So I'm pretty keen on that. I love DBX 160s as well.
Have you tried? Sorry, have you tried the Unfairchild, the one that Eric Valentine has made?
I haven't.
Is
that's hardware, is it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's hardware, and it's got a whole sort of expansion unit that gives you control over all the things you don't have control over in a Fairchild.
Oh, right.
So it's really interesting. He's done a couple of videos. It might be worth checking one out because it's still expensive, but it's nothing like a Fairchild expensive. So yeah,
I'll check that.
Anyway, you got anything else on your desert island?
Well, they only asked for 3, didn't they?
Oh, right. Okay.
Sure.
I love my console, my 5088 console. Yeah. I just love the way it sounds. It's beautiful.
Well, I mean, I could easily record anything through a 1073 and an 1176. For me, that's a chain that I can always make work. And a microphone, I would still take my RCA KU3s. I am still just astounded by them every time I use them. Even if it's whatever I'm recording is horrendous, it's the best sounding version of a horrendous thing I've ever heard. So I'm a fan of those.
Are they ribbons?
Yeah, they're ribbons. They're the precursor to the 77, but they're built for, sometimes people call them the 10,001s. They're built for the sound stages, so they've got the weird kind of slanted screen, and they're very
They're big,
directional.
right? They're big and heavy.
Yeah,
Right?
they're sort of, yeah. I mean, oh, I think I just put them away. I could grab you one, but they built an acoustic labyrinth behind it because they were on these sound stages with all these lights behind and stuff like that. So they're actually pretty close to cardioid, but without any of the weirdness phase-wise. But just they've managed to brace the back of the ribbon where the sound doesn't get to it, but the ribbon is still moving properly. So yeah, they're great, really great. And I got to add a fourth because since yesterday I've had a pair of big PMCs. I'm staring at them now because it's like they're gonna fall on me or something. And I think I might need to have them with me forever now. I've been on my old tannoys for the last 30 years, and I turned these on, and I thought that I would have to set the tannoys up as well, and I haven't even bothered. They're in the machine room. They're not coming out.
Have you heard the Barefoots?
I've heard some of the Barefoots. Yeah, not all of them. Which ones do you like?
I've only heard them at a trade show, to be honest.
Right.
But I've stuck with my speakers ever since coming here, and they are B&W 802s.
Right.
And I've got 5.1 of them.
And that's what's all over Abbey Road too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Lots of Fairchild chat going on in the chat room.
Can I just point out though, because there's a lot of mythology around Fairchilds. They are not full of unicorn poop. It's still hardware that somebody built. So they sound amazing, but they aren't magic. I like to point that out because some people think that they're actually full of magic. It just all adds up to be magical sounding. Sorry, that's my little rant.
Yeah.
And they tend to be different to each other, right?
Yes.
There's no.
I've never
two,
heard
yeah.
two that sound the same.
Which is why I'm interested to hear this guy, this Unfairchild.
Yeah, really good. I'll put you in touch with Eric if you want.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that'd be great.
There's a mastering engineer named Brian Lucy is in the chat, and he's talking about the where did he go? It was the ADL 670, the Anthony DeMaria Labs one. So that's another one for people to look at. So.
And Pendulum Audio did one.
That's a compressor, is it?
Yeah, it's another Fairchildish one. And the Pendulum Audio, maybe that had a 670 in the thing. They made that for 5 or 6 years, maybe longer. I don't know. That was another. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
nice.
None of them are going to sound like an out of spec Fairchild.
There you go. And Bob Holbrook is asking what model tannoys you're referencing, Andrew.
SRM 10Bs.
Nice.
So they're the wood cabinets, but not the ones that got the Mastering Lab crossovers. The model before that, then they did the Mastering Lab crossovers for the next model to try and make them sound like those. But they're very similar. And I guess as of today, I've got 4 pairs of them for sale. So hit me up.
There you go.
No, I'll hang on to them. They're a hell of a lot more portable than the PMCs. So if I got to go somewhere, yeah.
Right. Awesome. I have to say, how many episodes is it now? It's nearing 52, right?
No, I don't think we're at 52, but we're at, this is
40s?
40, let's see, 40, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 46.
I think this is in 46 episodes. This is the most geary.
This is.
Yeah, that we've got. Yeah.
Yeah, you had implied to me in emails that it would be non-technical.
Well, the Q&A does always get technical.
Yeah.
And I fangirled and geeked out on you a couple of times. And I do apologize for that. But
I'm fine. I'm fine with it. I'm happy to talk tech anytime.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So let me see here. So another one. This is our most currently upvoted question. And this is from Robert Pott. He says, "Hi, Andrew and Alan. Thanks for all you do and the good inspirational works in various fields of producing music. Of course, there's no perfect formula as to how to write or produce the perfect radio song. But having said that, could you describe what would be good or even the best ingredients to approach such a formula? Thanks, gents. I'm Robert Pott, founder and only member of Dutch Future World Orchestra."
If I knew how to answer that question, I would make every single song I wrote an enormous hit. There is no magic formula. You just trust your instincts. You listen to what others say. I mean, all my best work has in general been collaborative. But if anybody could make every song they wrote a hit, then they wouldn't be doing interviews like this.
And there'd only be one band in the world. I think it's also, and we've talked about this a bit tonight, is that how many monster hits completely break whatever the mold is for a hit. Like you talk about radio singles, they got to be 2 minutes 30, get in, get out, I need a chorus right away. And then there's Bohemian Rhapsody, there's American Pie, there's Music, just an endless list of the things, and that's what made them hits. But then you can't copy it because it was a hit because it was new and it was different, and that grabbed the imagination. And it's like, I mean, my example of this is Despacito, this gigantic runaway hit, and then everybody's putting the quattro on everything. Like, that's not why that was a hit. It's not it. So you can identify things you like and try to understand why you like something, and then maybe that can inspire you to do something. But yeah, the only reason there are hits is that there is no formula, I think.
Absolutely.
Which
gents, we're approaching 3-hour mark. Could we wrap it up in the next 5 minutes?
Yeah, you want to do one last question?
Sure.
All right.
Okay, wonderful. Well, let's make sure it's a great one. This one comes from Peter Kierman, and he says, "Thanks, Andrew and Alan, for all your inspiration throughout the years. I have a question for Alan regarding stereotomy. The sounds on the title track are amazing."
Stereotomy,
sorry. The sounds on the title track are amazing. And how did you get those sounds, the guitar, hi-hat, bass, to be so clear, pure, and in your face, besides choosing great source sounds?
Subscribe to the video series called The Art and Science of Sound Recording. I don't know. Thank you. I mean, all I can say is thank you. It's a nice compliment. Most of the tracks on Stereotomy are treated with ambisonics. That gives a certain dare I say, immersive effect to it. I mean, Stereotomy was. I think it was during the Simmons period. I think Simmons drums were de rigueur at that time. If I mixed it again, I would probably try to substitute the Simmons snare with a real snare. It's most likely to be on a separate track anyway, so it should be easy enough to get rid of it. But yes, I mean, I'll just take it as a compliment. I can't offer any explanations, I'm afraid.
Fair enough.
Okay, I have a quick one for you, I think. This one's also from Brian Lucy, and he asks, how do you balance collaboration versus your vision?
Balance collaboration with my vision.
Yeah, when collaborating with other artists.
As a producer, you have to be the boss. You have to have the final word on everything. But in terms of writing lyrics or coming up with guitar riffs or guitar parts or keyboard parts or whatever, I mean, I think that's just that works well collaboratively. But it's only when there's any kind of disagreement or conflict that the producer has to have the final say. But I've been blessed in the last few years with working with people I love to work with. I've never had any conflicts. So, but the producer must have the last word.
Right. And I think that is the last word. Ta-da! See what I did there?
Gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been really fun, and I hope you'll get some interest in it.
Yeah.
After the event as well as from today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for doing this, and I'll
And
definitely.
I have incredible beard envy, Andrew.
just stop shaving. That's all I got to say. It's all I do is not shave. So, excellent. This is really, really great, and I will definitely put you in touch with Eric to talk some Unfair Child.
Okay. Thank you.
And hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Sounds good.
All right, now's where we wave awkwardly, and I'll mute the mic mid-sentence and say thanks for